Alright, so today we're going to be taking a look at how to get a jaw down shape for our characters using blend shapes. This is one of the Autodesk character generator characters, so they are made of both a body mesh and then also the teeth are separate, so they'll actually have to be separate blend shapes. So I figured I'd just go ahead and do the sculpt on this character so that I don't have to do it two times to show you that this one might be a little different than the one, I guess, more cartoony looking character. Alright, so to get going, you can see that I have a blend shape here called face blend shape. I already have jaw down made. So what I can do is go ahead and dial this up and rebuild the target so that I can scoot it off to the side, like this. Alright, so now that this is off to the side, what we can do is start to use all the tools in our bag to get the jaw down shape as quickly as possible. So the first step that I usually do for getting this going is to just do a hard selection without any I guess you would call it soft selection turned on, so that I can just move this whole thing as a solid unit straight down and maybe angle it just a little bit so that it more mimics what would happen as your jaw kind of goes down naturally. Okay, so you can see this looks really bad as far as the overall shape, but what you can do is actually use some of the sculpting tools to fix this terrible looking thing in just a second. So the other thing that I'll want to do is make sure that this kind of floor of the mouth, which is what this part is also kind of going down all as one solid unit and is angled a little bit, just like our uh, original movement. So that'll make our sculpt look a little bit better. Okay, cool. So now I can start using the sculpting tools to round out this shape, also fix the stuff in the neck, and maybe add a little bit of movement here in the jaw and here in the cheeks, so it feels a little bit more fleshy. Okay, so what I'm doing now is grabbing the sculpt tool. If I'm in my sculpting tab, the one I'm using is here. It's called grab. And in the tool settings, you'll see that the size is 0.007. It seems very, very small, but that's just kind of how it works. The strength is set to 100, so for this one, because I kind of want it to follow exactly with whatever my mouse is doing, I don't want it to lag behind. The one that I will adjust right off the bat is here. This second tool over is called Smooth, and if I click it, you can see that the strength is set to 10, and that will make it so that your verts aren't jumping around a lot. If this is set higher than that, or like at 100, it'll be really hard to control the sculpting. So the cool part is if you have grab active, so moving these around a little bit, if I hold shift, you can see my circle changes color, then I'm automatically going to be using the smoothing tool. So I can use smooth without having to constantly switch to the smoothing brush. So here I'm just kind of moving and averaging this out. The bottom of the chin looks really weird right now, so I'll pull that out a little bit, do the smooth, pull it like that. Let's work it a little better, bring that up. There we go. So this is pulling down, pulling up, and then doing a little bit of smoothing to kind of average out some of the positions of the verts. And I'm working slowly because I don't want to accidentally go too far and not be able to get back to a nice happy point. So the other thing to keep in mind is that these shapes need to look good from all sides, and with the mouth open, the skin of your mouth is going to kind of get a little tighter as it pulls down like this, and also the angle that it makes from the side should almost be straight. Right now you can see there's this little bit of a curved line. You want to make sure that that is looking a little bit more like this, a little straighter. Straighten this out too. Cool. All right, so that's starting to look pretty good. Use the smooth tool just a little bit more here. I might even grab this and pull it down and then average that just to try and force it to be a little bit better. Alright, so then I'm going to shift this line here so that it feels a little bit more like the jaw was rotating. And I might even go back to the smoothing tool, dial this up to like 25 instead. Because at this point I feel like a lot of the movement is looking pretty good. Alright, cool. So let's dial our shape back and forth and watch what happens. Yeah, you can see the corners of the mouth come in a little bit. Our jaw is moving down and back a little bit. That's kind of the general path of our jaw as it's moving through space. So I think this one is looking pretty good. And you can see a little bit of movement here below the chin. That's very natural. The skin in your gullet's going to move a little bit. And here in your jaw, I might do a little bit more of an adjustment. Right now it's just kind of pushing down. It should kind of stem from the upper part almost where the ear is. So what I can do is shift, oop, that's a little bit much. Shift that back just a little bit. And then pivot this and see. Yeah, so might be a little bit strong. Let's, yeah, just a little bit of a hint of movement there in the jaw. Yeah, there you go. Cool. So I'll do one last touch here in the face where I'm pulling the cheeks down just a little bit. It'll make the whole bottom here underneath of the cheeks just feel a little bit more connected. And I might put just a hint of movement here in the nostril. Make sure that I don't have too much. So pull that down just a little bit, and that a little bit. So now when you are using this shape, when you're using your jaw down, there's just a hint of movement in the whole bottom part of the face. Just feels a little bit more organic. Cool. So let's take a look briefly just here in the corner inside. There might be a little bit of an averaging we can do to make it feel a little bit better. That should be good. Cool. Alright, so our jaw down shape is looking good, but as I said, both of the teeth are separate objects and they're staying still right now. So all we got to do is make sure that our bottom teeth get their own blend shape. So this one, I will say create blend shape, name it teeth, and add a target. And this one is actually really, really easy because I'm not having to make any fancy shapes. Your mandible kind of moves all as one thing. And so I'm going to use the other fancy part that this menu can do, which is to leave the edit option on for one of my blend shapes. And then if I'm clicking and dragging verts or faces, then it actually gets transferred directly to my blend shape. So I don't have to necessarily always do the rebuilding of the target workflow that I've mentioned in order to get a successful blend shape. So I'll click that off now, and if I dial this back and forth, you can see that the jaw is now moving and my head is moving. Cool. So I'll dial both of these down and then make sure to save. The final part of this would be connecting both of these shapes to a single control. And I'll go ahead and run through making a control one more time quickly from scratch. So first, what we'll do is make a circle. Make sure that circle is facing forward. Scale that circle down a little bit. And freeze transformations. So now that I've done all of those things, when I move this up and down, what I want to do is limit it so that it can only go up to 1 and down to 0 using the attribute editor. And inside of the attribute editor, I'm going to go into my limit information, translate, activate this, 1 and 0. So now I can only move this control up and down. And then in the channel box, I'll go ahead and lock every control besides that one. Lock. So now I can't move this control any direction except for up and down. So that's good. I'll name this jaw control. And then I'll give it a border, actually using a little bit of a different trick this time, just so it's not repeating the same thing and y'all aren't learning good stuff. So with this, I'm actually going to draw out using the Bezier curve, which is this tool underneath of the curves and surfaces. And if you hold X, you can get these tools to snap to a grid like that, as like where the point will actually be drawn. And so if I hold X, click and drag, then you can get really nice bends actually. So here, what I'm going to do is make this kind of pill shape. And then the last point, you can just hit the select tool at any time to stop using your Bezier curve. You can grab that point, hold X, and snap it to the grid. And so now you have this nice pill-shaped thing that you can scale into place, shift it up, and then just move these few points. Oops. Oh, right. Forgot. Got to turn off symmetry. It doesn't like it when you do symmetry for some reason. So I'll just shift these up so it's a little out of the way. So this is a much fancier version of one that we did earlier where we were modifying a circle, but in this case I'm just drawing that out. So anyway, now that I have it drawn out, I'll give it a new name called jaw border. Oops. Yeah, whatever. I'll just leave it like that. I'll clear history and freeze transformations. The final step for this one is always to make sure that you can't select it because you don't want to accidentally select it instead of your controls. So I'll go into Object Display, Drawing Overrides, Enable, and Reference. Now that it's a reference, I can no longer select it. I can only select my control. So I'll select both of them in my outliner, which I can still do. Group, say jaw control. Or sorry, this should be jaw group. And now that I have this all in place, I can scale it. Oops. Grab the group, move it in place, and scale it down to the appropriate size so it's a little bit easier to manage. Don't need my controls to be enormous. Cool. And actually, I just realized something. So even though I've gone through all this trouble to make the control over here, what I could do is instead actually make a face control. So to that end, I'll actually do a little bit of an alternative workflow. Make a circle, rotate it, freeze transformation so that it's straight up and down I'll do jaw down control, put it in its own group. That. Then I can move my group in place. Like this. Okay, so this, what I want to do with this one is, this is the starting point, and what I want to do is basically make it so that it's easy to move this control up and down and not lose track of it. So what I'll do is type -1. So that's all the way down at her knees. So what I'm going to do is scale the group until control is kind of in a much better place. Yeah, so that seems like how far down I have to scale my jaw control, so that 0 would be here and -1 is only down there. So that's much easier to work with. At this point, what you can do is kind of customize the shape of stuff so that you can keep track of what's going on. I'll grab the points, and like that. Oops. Cool. So go ahead and type 0 in my jaw control. Maybe move it up just a little bit. The group, not the control. And then make sure to select my control, grab everything that isn't the Y up and down, and lock it. Then finally do my limits. And this time, instead of the minimum being 0, I'm going to make the minimum -1 and the maximum 0, so it can only go up to 0 and down to -1, like that. So now that I have that control in place, I can link both of these blend shapes excuse me, to my control. To get that going, I'll select the control first, Y, edit, set driven key, load driver. Now that I have my driver, I want to right click on my face blend shape first, load driven, jaw down, and start to link them together. So I've got my face blend shape, I've selected my jaw down target, I've got my jaw down control and my Y translate, and I've hit key. So you can see that the blue indicator indicates that the jaw down is now linked to this. If I move this down to -1, I can then dial this all the way up to 1 and key it. So if I manipulate this control back and forth, I should see my blend shape working. And then the final step would be to link your other blend shape to the same control. So I don't have to change my driver, but I do have to change the driven. By right-clicking, select a blend shape, load driven, and teeth down 1 is going to be my target. I will key. You can see the blue indicator has appeared. Select that, move it down, dial up my target, key again, and it should be good to go. Cool. So there you can see a couple types of controls. Your standard kind of phoneme control that I've mentioned how to make a couple times with a little bit of an edit using the Bezier curve to get the nice border. But this control, which is more kind of linked to the face itself, I'm having basically follow around the head. There, I guess, is going to be one final step, which would be making sure that this control follows along with the head. If you remember back from our IKFK project, I would use a parent constraint to make that happen by first selecting my head joint and then second selecting the group, not the control. I can do a point constraint, or sorry, I can do a parent constraint with maintain offset turned on, and if I hit apply, now anywhere my head goes, my jaw control is going to follow, and I can still animate my jaw control. Cool. So that is it for linking controls, and hopefully that will help you get a little bit farther down the road with sculpting. Um, the trick that I mentioned in class, which is to use the jaw down as a jumping off point for making new blend shapes, is I guess a little bit of a different workflow. So that'll be the final thing we'll talk about today. So say I wanted to make an A shape. A kind of has a pretty wide mouth here, and just like the the other one, the teeth is separate. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and hide those. So say that this was going to be my jumping off point for making my A shape. What I can do is, instead of clicking add target over here, I'm just going to do an old school method, which is to duplicate the mesh as it currently exists. And by doing that, I've created this extra mesh down here in the hierarchy, and it's currently locked. It's because it's being made from the skin, which is also locked. So in order to move it to the side, I actually have to hit unlock twice. Then I can scoot it off to the side. Oh, my goodness, it's moving so quickly. All right, then I can move it off to the side and start to make edits to this. Before I do that, I'll go ahead and dial down my blend shape so I'm not getting confused as to what's happening. So say my A shape, the changes that I want to make are first to make sure that it's symmetrical. Maybe I want to pick the corners of the mouth up a little bit, like that. Maybe move them back, pick up the upper lip a little bit, and widen the mouth just a skosh. Alright, so say this is, for whatever reason, the shape that I wanted to use for A. How I can add this as a target for my head is to simply have it selected, right-click my target, and say Add Selection as Target. So it's kind of doing the reverse order. Instead of making one, or making a blend shape and then generating it and moving it to the side, I've made a duplicate, moved it to the side, did my modifications, and then re-added it. So now you can see I've got this thing that's named incorrectly. This is actually maybe AI, or the AI shape. And so if I dial this up and down, you can see that that blend shape is that duplicate mesh, or it looks just like the duplicate mesh that was off to the side. So instead of having to constantly redo that little bit of mouth opening, I find that starting from that point where you're here and then duplicating your mesh and doing stuff can often save you a lot of heartache, because that sometimes can be the hardest part. Getting this whole bottom of the jaw to move nicely, getting this part over here to move nice and consistently, it's just a pain in the butt. So if you only have to do it once really, really well, then you can reuse that work again and again and again. Similarly, you can have your A shape like this. You can make sure that your teeth are visible. You can move your teeth down a little bit like this and make a copy and duplicate it. But because the teeth are so easy, in this case I will often just add a target and say like AI down or something like that, and then do the same trick where I'm editing with the red button on. Move it down and rotate like that. So this becomes my new blend shape target that matches my teeth up here. Cool. So that's another nice trick that you can do to get your shapes going a little faster. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. I think I covered all the things that were mentioned in class, but if you don't, or if I've left something out, please shoot me a message so that I can add on to the recording or make a little separate recording, or just answer it in an email. All right. Well, thanks very much. I'll see you guys Wednesday.